Elections in Bangladesh are scheduled to take place in January of 2024. Sheikh Hasina-led Awami League is seeking re-election for the third consecutive term. Now, with just 2 months to go for the elections, the United States government, its agencies and the embedded media have been called out for orchestrating a regime change operation in Bangladesh. US's Time magazine has now put the three-time Bangladeshi PM on its cover and accused her of compromising democratic values in the country. The next of the publication's front page reads, Sheikh Hasina and the future of democracy in Bangladesh. Well, this is not the first time. Remember, the US has tried to interfere ahead of a political battle, and they have done so earlier as well. Well, interestingly, there have been ramifications, though, already felt of this in Bangladesh, where protests have also begun on ground in Dhaka. Let's quickly take a look at the instances where the US has interfered in Bangladesh politics before we open it up to our guests. Let's quickly show you some incidents, some examples of what has occurred in Bangladesh. The US's interference in Bangladesh, of course, has been seen time and time again. On the 3rd of November 2023, remember, this latest occurrence has happened where Time magazine featured the Bangladeshi PM, Sheikh Hasina, and tried to portray her as an autocratic leader. So this was, of course, the picture that they had put up with the caption that I told you earlier. Well, earlier, last month, 20th of October 2023, the US ambassador to Bangladesh, Peter, met with the country's chief election commissioner, Qazi Habibul Lawal, as well, in a meeting that, of course, clearly would have raised eyebrows. Soon after, members of the BNP clashed with the police, resulting in the death of a constable. Remember, BNP, of course, is a prominent party in the country of Bangladesh. And the US State Department imposed sanctions on serving and retired officials of Rapid Action Battalion, the RAB, on the 20th of August earlier in the year. This was again a step taken by the US vis-a-vis Bangladesh. The RAB was accused at that point of helping Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's Awami League party. Meanwhile, the US announced also a new visa policy to promote free and fair elections in Bangladesh. They did this on the 24th of May 2023, and under this policy, the US said that it could impose visa restrictions on individuals and their family members if responsible or complicit in undermining democratic elections in Bangladesh. Well, the US ambassador to Bangladesh, Peter Haas, meanwhile met with the families of victims of enforced disappearance in Dhaka. And this was something, I think the date of that should be, is incorrect. It should perhaps be last year, because 15th of December 2023 has not happened as yet. So that, of course, is last year's development that has taken place. Let's also quickly open it up to our guests now. Joining us live, we have Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat, live with us at this point. Also with us is Major General Gigi Dwivedi, Strategic Affairs Analyst. Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us live as well. Madhav Nalapat, let me begin with you first. What do you make of these instances of the US trying to meddle in the internal politics of a country, in this case Bangladesh, sir?
Well, look, I'd like to say that if you remember, from the time that Bangladesh was liberated by the Mukti Bahini and the Indian armed forces, the United States was opposed to that. They supported the genocide in Bangladesh. At that time, it was Nixon and Kissinger who were in power. And frankly, they seem to be, I mean, the fact is that the Bangladeshi government of Sheikh Hasina does not respond very well to American pressure or to American cues. So America gives a hint, you do it this way, you do it that way. Sheikh Hasina says, no, I'll do it the way I feel is good for Bangladesh, which I think is the way any national leader ought to operate. So I think some officials there cannot forgive Sheikh Hasina for her independence. And therefore they have, the problem in the United States is that they deal with so many issues that almost all the issues, high-level involvement is really very rare. Involvement in the sense of anything beyond a cursory look and a signature is extremely rare. And from that point of view, it's very likely there are a group of officers there who are in the United States, State Department, and maybe some other departments of the United States administration, who basically don't like Sheikh Hasina for her independent spirit. The reality is, under Sheikh Hasina, India and Bangladesh have more or less normalized relations. Road links are open, other transportation links are being opened, and that is to the benefit of both countries. That has been a huge step forward. And and in case the opposition party comes to power, that particular party is very close to Pakistan and China. So, frankly, I don't understand the logic of what the Americans are up to, except to say I think President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken need to check and see which officials in their government initiated this kind of a anti-Hasina move and find out their motivations and find out the ground report, including the relations between Bangladesh and a very important strategic partner of the United States, which is India.
Right. Let me also, in fact, quickly get in Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal at this point. Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal, what do you believe the effect of these latest developments will be on the upcoming Bangladesh election?
Uday, frankly speaking, before I came to this discussion, I was reading the story from Op India, which seems to have inspired the news and the discussion. And I was going through the story in a rather rapid, therefore I may have missed a few things. But frankly, I'm very, very confused because the story imports to be that the USA take Hasina to come back as the prime minister for some reason or the other. And the material they have used for this is some stories which have appeared in the Times New magazine portraying Sheikh Hasina as a hardliner or as a hard taskmaster. I forget the word they had used, basically. But Sheikh Hasina being tough. Then action taken by the US ambassador in Dhaka to meet the chief election commissioner, policy issued on the visa, etc. One thing which comes to my mind immediately, always whenever I read these kind of things, is what does the US gain out of, even if we assume that the US wishes to change Sheikh Hasina and bring in a new prime minister. And mind you, I'm not denying that the US is not beyond that. US is can do it. They all want the regimes in the country which is favorable to them. And if they can do it, why not? If they can't do it, they will have to wait for the results. But as far as the stories are concerned, embedded media, what is the embedded media? I frankly, there are media there in the USA and in India who, in fact, there's a lot of Indian media in India which seem to be supporting the ruling party. And so is it in the USA. And they do reflect the views of the party in the government or the party, Republicans or Democrats. But what I don't, whenever this is come, my question is, what does anybody gain out of this? Is there somebody else in Bangladesh who they want as the prime minister? I can't see any. Sheikh Hasina is actually the strongest opponent to Khalida Zia. Ultimately, if you look at it, Khalida Zia was even worse prime minister. And as far as India is concerned, for us, Sheikh Hasina is far, far better than Khalida Zia. So who do they want? Is there any name? I don't see any name at all floating around. There are only 2 months left for the elections. By now, a name would have appeared. The only strong name against Sheikh Hasina is Khalida Zia. Nobody wants her really. So why would they want to do it? I'm not saying that they may or may not, but it seems very, very far-fetched to me that they would want to stop the election of Sheikh Hasina. That's all I can say really at the moment. And the rest is all imputation, the rest is all a lot deductions, some logical, some illogical, some trying to basically associate motives with what they're doing. But I think we need to be careful. When these stories come, we need to be slightly more rational and mature in our own judgment and wait for either the events to happen and get some more information before we can make a judgment. At the moment, the information that I get from the article is not really such a lot, and it's really very sketchy for me to make a judgment that USA is actually trying to do something. And please do remember that India has had very good relations with the US governments for more than a decade now, whoever the prime minister is, whether it is Republican or Democrat, because ultimately the interests of both the USA and India are converging, whichever is the part of the person in the government. So let us really remember our common interest and not try to basically, because mind you, if these things happen when we begin to accuse US of trying to do something in the region, it will have impact for that.
All right, let me also quickly rope in Major General Dwivedi at this point as well. Major General Dwivedi, clearly, we are seeing attempts play out at meddling by the United States of America. It's been seen in other countries. Why is it happening once again, still in the 21st century? What does the US want through this? What will be the impact on ground?
Well, Uday, first and foremost, I follow Bangladesh very closely and with a lot of deep passion because fought the Bangladesh war and made my own little contribution in the formation of this new nation. Having said that, well, there are a couple of reasons as to why US has a history of interfering with the elections and regime change. Is nothing very new, and what has come out in the media is not totally ill-founded. There is certain amount of, I think, rationality and certain amount of interest that US has in this whole game. First and foremost, you see, US has done number of regime changes in Latin America and lately in the Middle East. Why? Because US has a delusion that it is the conscience keeper of the world. It is a beacon of democratic system, and it has a tendency to export its own kind of system and impose it on the others. That is one particular reason. Secondly, US has double standards. Primarily it jockeys its own interest. You see, in Middle East or West Asia, the US uses different yardstick. There, they do not talk about democratic norms or human rights. No, they don't do that. But when it comes to other regions, they are always on the forefront. Coming especially to Bangladesh and why US is meddling. Firstly, South Asia is very important for US geostrategically. And you see, in Pakistan, they have backed up the dictatorial regimes. But as long as they were pursuing US interest, and in Afghanistan, US poured billions of dollars to win over Pakistan support. And then they left overnight, took to the heels, and handed over to Taliban. So many times it's very difficult to figure out what exactly US is up to. In Bangladesh, US has three very important strategic interests. Firstly, it wants to checkmate China. And secondly, whenever the government is not supportive of American interest, then it tries to bring pressure on that particular government. So in this case, it will not be totally regime change, but to bring certain amount of pressure on Sheikh Hasina government and her in person that they need to toe the line of US and also symbolically, I will again say symbolically, safeguard the human rights and also at least to ensure that elections are fair and the democratic norms are held. This is what actually USA has that delusion and also it stands for. And the last point which I wish to make is that the meddling is obvious because in US media has a very important role to play. And in this case, when you put a leader on the front page of a very important global magazine, it has a message. Secondly, when the ambassador is hobnobbing between one party and the other and having an audience with the Chief Election Commission, it can't be just wished away. You have to join the dots. Means it has a intricate, intimate interest. So all I can say is that US pursues its own interest where it suits. It jockeys the human rights and democratic norms where it doesn't suit. It can make an exception. In this case, I think US has deep interest. My last point is India needs to be watchful because we had excellent relation with the current government and also for the larger interest of Bangladesh over the last about 10 years. Bangladesh has made phenomenal progress. Its GDP is far more than Pakistan, is the fastest growing economy, has healthy foreign exchange reserves of about $35 billion. And when you talk of human development index, it actually ranks ahead of India. So I think in our interest, we need to be watchful and ensure that unnecessary pressure is not brought on the current dispensation. And we need to support this current dispensation and the government. And also, indirectly, we can always give a message to the US and the government that please let Bangladesh alone and let the people of Bangladesh decide their own future. Uday.
Yes, let me quickly also, in fact, go back now to Madhav Nalapat. Madhav Nalapat, you know, again, it's the same script. If we talk about the media now, the media's role as well, including Time magazine's cover, which you must have seen on Sheikh Hasina, and other headlines, perhaps, which will come in the next few days as well, on the Awami League, on Sheikh Hasina, on democracy in Bangladesh, or the lack of it, as they believe. It's a familiar script. It's been seen often. We in India to know it, don't we? Madhav Nalapat.
Matter is that, as you correctly said, a lot of these stories originate from within government. The government, in the United States, the administration, they leak information to selected correspondents whom they know will basically go by the information they have and who really don't know very much about the region, and then they will carry these stories. So that is frankly happening, and it's a commonplace. But the reality of the situation where Bangladesh is concerned is that when you're talking about Khaleda Zia and Sheikh Hasina, frankly, is much less likely to veer over to the side of China than Khaleda Zia. Khaleda Zia has got extensive linkages to the Pakistan military. And this, frankly, this kind of a tilt indicates the deep hold that the Pakistan military still has inside the United States. You know, they got individuals in every department of government who are basically US citizens, but who are essentially basically sympathetic to the Pakistan military and who basically, go and do whatever they can to help that particular military in some of its tasks. So I think this is a problem in which you have individuals in the administration who are basically got a vested interest, who have an agenda, and who are misusing the US administration to promote that agenda. And this has been a consistent problem in the United States. The consistent problem is that you have 100 policymakers in Washington, all of whom are 80 of whom or 85 of whom are not major players, but who can influence this policy or that policy. So you have multiple policies, often contradictory policies, and the whole result is that people get completely confused about the direction of US policy. I agree fully with what General Dwivedi has been saying. And the reality situation is, for example, the Pakistan military is the main factor behind the defeat of the United States by the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's the main factor. It misled the United States after the first few months. The US went back to Pakistan, and from that time, the downfall started because Pakistan military surreptitiously started building back the Taliban and keeping it alive. And of course, the reality is now they are facing the fact that many young Pashtuns are very unhappy at the second-class status that Pashtuns have in Pakistan as compared to individuals in another province. And they are therefore turning against Pakistan, to the surprise of the military. But the reality of the situation is, in Bangladesh, whatever the faults of Sheikh Hasina, the reality is she's a much better bet for regional stability than Khaleda Zia. And as the general correctly says, it's between these two choices. And between these two choices, there's no doubt that not only for India, but essentially for the US as well, Sheikh Hasina would be a better choice. And I think they'd be well advised to try and reach out to her rather than antagonize her in this manner.
Yes, let me quickly go across now for some closing comments to Ambassador Goel. Ambassador Goel, do you believe that this obviously is being done with some sort of vengeance against Sheikh Hasina, or is it being done simply for the BNP, whom the US would want to come back in power? Would that end the Cold War with Bangladesh, or not quite? Or is there some other reason that we need to read between the lines and see?
Uday, there is nothing between the lines that I can read here, frankly speaking. And where is the Cold War between the USA and Bangladesh? I think the USA and Bangladesh relations have been quite comfortable, as far as I know, over the past 4 or 5 years. There has been no statement from the USA critical of Sheikh Hasina's performance or of Bangladesh policies. I have not seen anything. What I'm seeing here is really, yes, the US ambassador is meeting with the Chief Election Commissioner. Perfectly a normal job for any ambassador to do in any country where he represents you.
They impose sanctions on the RAB though as well. And we also saw that statement made on visa policy.
I'll come to that part. Perfectly legitimate part of any functioning, particularly 2 months before the elections. They impose sanctions on RAB and they have announced a visa policy. The demonstrations which are taking place in Bangladesh are not the demonstrations by the Awami League. They are the demonstrations by Khalida Zia's party, BNP. And therefore, if those demonstrations are taking place and there is a possibility of elections being stolen by the opposition party through these kind of demonstrations or the vote rigging, etc., and the USA says that when they are issuing visas, they will be careful, and those people who actually steal the elections or who actually work against the unfair practices in election, they will not issue visa to them. That kind of a thing is not acceptable to me. But that is not something which goes against Sheikh Hasina. So all I'm saying here, the US is doing several things which are not really legitimate for a democratic process or democratic party. But I don't see anywhere that seem to be, except the media article in the magazine Time. But there are so many articles against Modi in the US media. Does it mean that they have been inspired by the US government? No. Or maybe if they are, that means the USA is playing double game against India. But either way, because the relations between India and the USA are compatible, I will not go that path. All I'm saying here is, let us not interpret too much in a few articles in the media and a meeting between the US ambassador and the Bangladesh Chief Election Commissioner, because I don't interpret them really as a diplomat to be going against Sheikh Hasina. Uday.
Okay, let me give the last word then to Major General Dwivedi. Closing comment, the last word.
Well, Uday, I think we need to take a holistic look at it. And I go along with Professor Madham Nalapat that there are some collusive forces which are at work. And let me share with you, I have spent fair amount of time in US. There are lobbies. Pakistan lobby is very much at work, and Chinese lobby in the background. Chinese have fair amount of inroads into the American media. So first and foremost, you can't rule out the handiwork of Pakistan and China in this collusion. Secondly, the American, foreign policy at many times is very contradictory, and such contradiction is one such example in what's happening in Bangladesh. I don't quite understand as to why ambassador must be meeting the chief election commissioner, why Blinken must be making such statement about imposing restriction on visas. These need to be understood as a larger game plan, and therefore they have definitely interest and they are actually meddling in it. But I would once again say, India can use a good office to tell America that this is not the right approach. And I think for us, Sheikh Hasina, the best bet, not only for us or US, but for Bangladesh at large.
All right. And my thanks to all of our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.